morning, everyone. Welcome to everyone gathered here and to everyone online. Thank you for joining us. I'm reading today from Rays of the One Light. These are commentaries showing the similarities between the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. They're based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda and written by Swami Kriya-yoga. Today's topic is one of my favorites. Why do devotees fall? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. An endlessly fascinating question is, why did Judas fall after receiving the extraordinary blessing of being accepted into the inner circle of Jesus Christ's disciples? For Judas was one of the 12 apostles, yet he betrayed Jesus and earned for himself the opprobrium of Christendom for all futurity for his sin. We find Judas reprimanding Jesus just days before that betrayal. Jesus, aware that his disciples would soon be facing with his death the supreme tragedy of their lives, allowed Mary to express her devotion by anointing his feet with costly ointment. This act of wanton waste, as Judas saw it, awakened indignation in that disciple. Why was not this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor? This, he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and kept the purse and bare what was put therein. Then Jesus said, let her alone. Against the day of my burying has she kept this. For the poor always ye have with you, but me ye have not always. Doubt not the power of delusion. Respect it, indeed, fear it, though not in the sense of cowering before it. For as Yogananda said, one is not safe until he attains nirvikalpa samadhi, the state of final union with God. Judas, through attachment to money, opened his consciousness to subtle influences, which may be called satanic, that drew his thoughts towards other related attitudes. The importance of worldly power, for instance, and of worldly influence. The Gita gives a graphic explanation of how easily the mind can be drawn downward once it begins to feed on wrong attitudes. Krishna states, if one ponders on sense objects, there springs up attachment to them. From attraction grows desire. Desire, impatient for fulfillment, flames to anger. From anger there arises infatuation, the delusion that one object alone is worth clinging to the exclusion of all others. From infatuation ensues forgetfulness of the higher self. From forgetfulness of the self follows degeneration of the discriminatory faculty. When discrimination is lost, there follows the annihilation of one's spiritual life. As Yogananda said, at the first thought of delusion, that is the time to stop it. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Yogananda told Swamiji that Judas reincarnated during the time of Ramakrishna, who was a contemporary of Lahiri Mahashaya. And even in that lifetime, he had a little bit of attachment to money. And the other devotees would make fun of him and laugh at him, call him names. And Ramakrishna said, don't do it. Just stop. And it's important because you never know what someone else is going through. You can't see where they've been, what they're struggling with, how much of a hero they really are, despite some attachment or some idiosyncrasy. And Master said Judas was freed in that lifetime, and that's the goal for all of us, that freedom. And I was thinking about what it is to fall, and it's really directional. It's really where we are, generally speaking, because it's a spiral staircase. We work on issues. I was thinking of this in terms of a court case that Swami himself had to go through. And in earlier centuries, it probably would have been an actual war. It probably would have been helmets and swords and getting out there and battling it out. Instead, it was in the courtroom. And that's an example of how we face the same tests on higher and higher levels. And if we fall too far, then we start again on a lower level and just make our way up. But it's important to keep in mind, as Swami Kriya-yoga himself said, God made us, God made the pitfalls. He's not surprised when we fall in. And we shouldn't be surprised either. And we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves, like the nuns and monks of ages past, flagellating with the whip, just thinking how horrible we are, how horrible, and it's just such a terrible thing that we've done. It's important to have that discrimination, like the Bhagavad Gita is talking about, saying, okay, that was not the right thing. I should have done this. Remember that. Don't do it again. And learn. And then we go and we fall again. Oh, darn, I did it again. I can't believe it. And learn. Don't do that. And I love the thought of when we do something that we really don't want to do, a habit that we just keep falling back into. Instead of going in on ourselves and thinking how horrible we are, instead standing firm, looking God right in the eye and saying, I need help. Help me to overcome this. Don't hide. Don't run away. Look him right in the eye. There's a beautiful passage, I forget where it is in the Bible, but it says, God's strength is made perfect through my weakness, which means we are weak. We're small little creatures. But if we are aware of God's presence within, the more we realize that we are just, as Sri Yukteswar said, a mere idea resting on a fragment of spiritual light. The more we realize that, the more we understand that the only way to be happy, the only way to get through this, the only way to not keep falling on our nose is to realize that God is here and start trusting and loving Him. We are too double-edged, two-sided coin. We are full of ego, thinking, God is a doer, are you kidding? I'm in charge. Everything is for me to control, and I can do it because I have all this strength and wisdom. And the other side is, I'm so scared because I can't do anything. I'm so insecure. So that false humility and false bravado are the same coin. Thinking you are the doer. But we're not. It's funny because as I get older and friends leave this body, and it's getting to be sort of more and more of them, I start realizing, and friends who have been sort of frenemies, people who I've had conflicts in the past, one of them is developing Alzheimer's now. And so when I think of that person, what were we fighting about? What difference does any of it make? We work so hard to get all our money in the bank, and then poof, we're gone. We can't take the money with us, even though I'm sure some people would like to know who they're going to be in their next life so they can will all their money to that person. There's got to be a loophole somewhere. What's happening? I didn't touch anything. That was the loophole, yes. Some things are not our fault. But we need to realize that this life is a dream. We were spending some time with friends recently, and we were reminiscing about years ago and things that were happening years ago. And it was a little difficult. It was like, why are we talking about this? It all seems like a dream. Just like this beautiful song we were singing this morning, life is a dream. Why get caught up in it? Why feel like I am in charge? When you think about it, are you making your blood pump? Are you consciously, are any of us consciously working on breathing in and out? Do we forget sometimes that we're breathing? It's not that easy sometimes to breathe. Who's breathing? Who's giving us that breath? Who's pumping the blood? Who made our bodies? Who gave us the spark of life? We're not in charge. We're not controlling anything. Are we controlling the wave when we're trying to surf? If we try to do that, we're going to fall. And so how do devotees fall? They try to control everything. They try to think that I am the doer, think that I'm in charge. I make my hair brown. In fact, I do. But I don't make my eyes brown. I don't give myself... I guess I shouldn't admit that, but anyway. We are not in charge. And the more I grow older, the more I see that I never was. It's not my power that's allowing me to walk. It's not my power that's allowing me to do anything. It's God's power. And the more that we realize that we're in partnership with God, how sweet everything becomes. And how much freer we become, so that we're not caught in the web of delusion. I often think that life can be summarized by an up arrow and a down arrow. Our energy and consciousness is either rising towards God, towards freedom, towards God is the doer and let's enjoy this show together, or down towards I've got to get that money in the bank. I've got to think about myself first. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to choose. Everything's my decision. I'm going to control everything as best as I can. That's the delusive force drawing us, pulling us towards materialism, towards that heavy consciousness of what's in it for me because I am number one. And the other up arrow is what can I do to help this world? What can I do to help everyone? How can I serve other people? How can I serve God in other people? I love that the Dalai Lama says, my religion is very simple. My religion is kindness. If we live in that thought of always being kind, we will be free. Will lead us towards that freedom. A friend of mine summarizes, I love these little pithy summarizations of the path, and she says, life is simple. Meditate and keep it clean. And keep it clean can be very much expanded into the body, the relationships, all the interactions, all the thoughts, everything we do, keeping our house clean, keeping our car clean, which is even harder, but keeping all of our life clean so that we're ready to go at any moment. I was just talking to a friend, a dear friend, in the kitchen this morning, and she was saying that one of her favorite movies is Groundhog Day, and mine too. And we used to think we should just teach a class on Groundhog Day. You know, show the movie and do a little class. But one of the lessons that I so love from that movie is that Bill Murray, our hero, what a great guy, in the beginning everything is about his ego. He calls himself the talent. It's all about him. He doesn't care about anything. And then, because of Groundhog Day, and he keeps repeating the same day over and over and over, but it's a spiral. He gets a little better every day. And he switches his consciousness. Instead of being all about himself, it's all about how can I help? And he times it all. He's rushing to be under the tree when the kid falls, and he catches the kid. And he's in the restaurant, and he's going 3, 2, 1, and he needs to do the Heimlich maneuver on somebody who's choking. And he's just working it. He's working to give energy, to give love, to give joy everywhere he goes. And that's us. We keep getting the opportunities. Are we going to shut the door on them? Or are we going to try to give love, joy? And someday we'll wake up, just like Bill Murray woke up, to perfect love.
and the affirmation that Swamiji paired with it, introspection, go together beautifully, because introspection helps us to be able to see where we're going. We sometimes think, why do devotees fall? Because they're not looking where they're going, or because they're not able to see where they're going. And introspection is that light of understanding that illuminates where we're going in such a way that we can see. One of the great gifts that Swamiji had among many was this uncanny ability to see into the future. And, I remember hiking. We recently received pictures from Yoko and Rick, who were at the Continental Divide. And I remember hiking at the Continental Divide many years ago, and just sort of being in awe of the fact that a drop of water on one side is going to end up in the Mississippi River, and on the other side is going to end up in the Rio Grande, or somewhere towards the Pacific Ocean. And that little shift, 3 inches one way or the other way, determines where the energy is headed. And that was the gift Swamiji had. He could look at the energy that was moving and say, if you extrapolate that, it leads to something good or not. And he could adjust accordingly in ways that seemed kind of mind-boggling. And we often get, we read the story of Judas, and it's like, that's pretty scary. I mean, here's a guy who was in the group. Master said he was a prophet. He had to have been to be in that collection of apostles. And yet, he got caught and had to work through, and had to go through other lifetimes, and as Nirmala pointed out, was freed in his most recent one with Ramakrishna. I mean, that's not a path that any of us aspire to, obviously. But we all get to learn in little ways what it's like to fall. As little children, devotees and disciples, we're learning to walk, we're learning to run. And guess what? When you're learning to walk, part and parcel of the process is learning to fall and learning to get back up again. It's just part of the job. We're all going to land on our noses at some point or other, and we just have to figure out what to do about it. And of course, spoiler alert, next week the topic is how devotees rise. So, you do get to hear the other side of it. There was a story that I read recently that really inspired me, and it was something that I'm sure some of you may know this, but I had never heard this part of the story. There was a young woman who was out of control enough that her family moved her to an institution, and they couldn't get anywhere with her. They couldn't even get near her. She would throw food at them. She would bite, scratch, scream. I mean, they couldn't even examine her. So they put her in a little locked cell, and basically just put food through the grate, but nobody really tried to get near her. Well, there was a maid, a young woman, a little younger than the girl who was there being locked up, who thought, well, if the doctors and nurses can't help this girl, I don't know what I can do. But then she thought, well, let me just bake some brownies. And she went home that night and she baked brownies, and in the morning she brought them to the girl, and she just said, I'm going to put these under the door for you, and if you want them, you can have them. They're for you. And, and then she took off because she was afraid she was going to get hit with one of them on the way out, which she didn't, and the girl did eat them. And they slowly developed a little bit of rapport. She would talk to the girl and, kind of help her understand what was going on. And gradually, as they developed a certain trust and connection, the doctors and nurses heard about it and said, well, would you help us to help her by getting her calmed down enough that we can at least examine her? So she did, and they discovered that she was nearly blind. She wasn't completely blind, but she was nearly blind. And gradually she relaxed enough and kind of got herself together that, and another institute opened up for the blind that was able to help her. And she ended up at that place not just as a sort of inmate, but she eventually became a teacher and was able to help people who were blind. Well, she returned to that first place called the Tewksbury Institute and asked if she could help. And initially the director thought, well, I don't know what you could do exactly. I mean, she was a teacher, but she wasn't, a doctor or a nurse or whatever. But then they thought, well, wait a minute, actually there was a letter we received recently from a father of another girl who was completely blind and completely deaf and was, in his words, deranged. She was completely out of control. And was looking for someone to come over to their home and work with her. And this girl named Annie thought, well, let me try. Let's just see. Well, who it ended up being was Helen Keller and Annie Sullivan. And when Helen Keller received the Nobel Prize, she was asked who had the greatest influence on your life, and she said Annie Sullivan. And Annie said, no, it was a maid who, at the Tewksbury Institute, a floor maid. And, if you think of the karma that was involved in being almost blind or being completely blind and deaf, it's easy to sort of get caught in the drama, and those things are veiled. Generally speaking, those things are veiled from us because it's not useful information. It's not helpful to sort of know what the origin of that was. But it's just so impressive what they chose to do with it. To take it as an opportunity instead of a disaster from which there was no good outcome. And, you think of thousands and millions of people who lived, 100 years ago around that same time. We don't know their names, we don't know their stories, but we know those two because of what they chose to do with what they had. And so often a fall leads to a great strength, leads to a great gift that can be given to the world, because once that lesson is learned, it becomes a strength. In the purification ceremony and in the fire ceremony, we talk about offering into the light. And there can be this sense, or offering into the flames, we're offering ghee into the fire, we're offering rice into the fire, and we can tend to think, oh, well, those things are being destroyed. But in fact, what's happening is they're being transmuted. They're being changed into a higher form. You could even go so far as to say they're being reincarnated into a higher level of energy. And that's what happens with any lesson that we've learned. We've struggled through it. We've learned the lesson. We've dealt with the karma. I can remember some lessons in my life and remember my mom very philosophically and very cogently explaining to me, basically, if you keep going down that trail, it doesn't have a good ending. She sort of, in a very motherly way, was saying, you're starting to wear a choke collar. I don't know if anybody even knows what that is, but dogs that are being trained, sometimes they put these collars on them because the dog wants to just run and pull and, yank the person's arm off. And the choke collar sort of kind of teaches the dog, don't do that, don't go there. Like Nirmala was saying, don't keep doing that because there's pain at the end of it. Well, eventually we get to the point where, like Swamiji, we don't have to wait for the pain. It's one of the great beauties of living in a community. We don't have to live through all the mistakes. We can live through other people's mistakes. We can learn from what they did that worked or that didn't work. And we don't have to go through all that same struggle and turmoil in ourselves. But with introspection and intuition, we can also learn, like Swamiji did, to just follow the energy, extrapolate it out a long, long way. Years ago in the construction trades, I learned a very simple little geometric truth. If you want to create a right angle, there's this thing called a 3, 4, 5 triangle. And if you have 3 on one leg and 4 on the other and 5 across the hypotenuse, that angle will be square. Well, so I mean, if you go 3 inches, 4 inches, 5 inches, yeah, you get this little tiny square. And if you try to extrapolate that out to the other side of a building, you can accrue some error at the end of it. Well, if you go 30 feet by 40 feet by 50 feet, you're going to dial it in pretty tight. And that's part of what Swamiji could do, and what all of us have the potential to do, is look way out at that point in the distance and say, oh, well, wait a minute, that's not true. That's not spot on. That's not where I'm trying to go. Let me reorient a little bit. And that orientation can just be by tiny degrees, but it leads us ever truly. And that's something we're all striving for. And next week we'll explore the topic more fully of how devotees rise and get on the up elevator, the up escalator, as Nirmala was pointing out. But for now, think of that introspective ability, because it's like a muscle. It's something that we can learn to do daily, to just reflect. And I love the reading, Swamiji saying, don't hide from it. Don't run away from the faults. Just observe without bias and just say, okay, well, then if that's the reality that it is right now, let me learn to deal with that. Face it, not judge it, not beat myself up over it. And same thing, what if we discover we have a blessing? What if we discover we have a talent? Just observe that too and say, okay, that's wonderful, that's fine. Observe my faults with gratitude and my talents with gratitude, and just say, Lord, work through me that some blessing come into this world, just like the little floor maid. We're all of us floor maids, and somebody is in the cell and we just decide to bake brownies for them. I mean, we could just ignore them, but why not? Try in some way to help the situation, and that's, as Nirmala was saying, that's God's energy flowing through us. Not I am the doer, God is the doer, and some grace can come through. We'll take an offering.